folks. Welcome back. We're here with another new episode of Unfinished Business for May of 2022. We are here to give you your latest movie news, your latest trailer news. Hopefully it's still latest by the time it reaches you. And of course, reviews. I, of course, am your gracious host, Jeff Galashaw. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Andre Joseph. And let's get into the news, and followed by the reviews, and we'll see how many we can fit in our time period. So first up, the latest news about, I'm sure, all of your favorite franchise, Fast 5X or Fast X or whatever it's called at this point, because I quit probably at part 5. But Justin Lin, the director of the franchise, has left the latest sequel only 1 week into filming. He's still staying on as co-writer and as producer, but I guess eventually the studio will have to find a director. Supposedly it's because maybe the Hot Wheels movie he really wanted to do finally got greenlit. Again, I'm just saying what I've heard. This isn't a joke. This is really what might be one of the reasons. And it's interesting because, like, this film, they're bringing in like more outside talent. Like, you have Jason Momoa, you have Brie Larson starring in this one, you have the girl who played Rat Girl in the Suicide Squad. So you have like a whole new crew. I mean, I guess you have to, since now they don't have The Rock or Jason Statham anymore. So, do you have any thoughts on this latest thing?
It occurred to me the other day that this is a franchise that's gone from a bunch of dudes hijacking trucks full of DVD players to them going into fucking space. That's how absurd this whole thing has become. So I feel like with Justin Lin leaving, there was something going on. There had to be something between him and Vin Diesel, because, I mean, this franchise has already gone over the top. So I don't know if Vin wants to go even further over the top, or if he wants to scale it back to the first movie, but it's just ridiculous. And what makes the situation even worse is the fact that they already started shooting. And so they're already losing a couple $1 million a day by not having a director on set. And, Brie Larson and Jason Momoa have other projects going on, so their time is pretty limited. And they're already having a hard time trying to secure somebody, because most of the other guys that did the other movies have other projects going on. And I don't know if they're going to go back to Rob Cohen at this point, because he's too old and probably thinks that the shit's gone way too far into, flippant territory. So I guess they're going to get a hack. I don't see Vin Diesel himself directing it, because then he'd violate the DGA. It's just a big mess. It'll probably still make a lot of money because people still love these films, but ultimately, it's no loss. He'd do better.
Well, I mean, if Hot Wheels the movie is your replacement project, not too much, but I mean, I know they're looking at F. Gary Gray as maybe one of the replacement directors. I can't say it affects me too much. It's an interesting that he dropped out, a week into filming, but other than that, I'm not really a big fan of these movies. The only, I'm just like, it's become almost like a running joke when you see a trailer for a new one, like, again? And they found a way to make another movie?
Did you see the Vin Diesel Instagram video when they first started shooting, and you see Justin Lin looking like a hostage? Like, yeah, this is going to be an exciting time, and it's the end of an era. Like, he just looked like he didn't want to be there. So something was going on, and I think we're going to find out in another week or two.
Well, yeah, because I know also that he also automatically dropped out of part 11, which is supposed to be the last or finale of this series. And I'm like, you guys waited till 11 to stop?
Have they gone to Africa yet? Because I think that's the only country we haven't seen him go to.
No, but I mean, I guess it will all be up to Tyrese if they ever go to Africa. Like I said, I'm like, it's interesting to see who they'll get as a replacement, but other than that, we'll see. I'm sure this movie sometime next summer, Next, to no one's shock, Warner Brothers has announced that they're going to make Batman 2 with Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson returning. No word yet on who the villain will be, but considering all the brouhaha over the deleted scene from the Batman with the Joker, who knows? That might be it. I mean, again, no real big news. We knew it was coming, even though those involved made it sound like, no, it's going to be a few years from now because we have to digest and, take our time. But I also wonder if maybe because even though they're still going through with the Penguin series, but like they got rid of, what was it, the Gotham City Patrol series?
Yeah.
Maybe that's why maybe they're like in a rush to maybe make a little more lore of or the world they've created with the Batman and of course the Penguin series.
I think they need to have a shorter running time, maybe make it a little less dark. Not Joel Schumacher level.
Okay, I was about to say.
Yeah, no, not that. But just maybe Pattinson needs to have a different personality for his Bruce Wayne. His Batman's okay, but we need to see Bruce Wayne evolve a little bit. And I also feel, again, do not do the Joker as the main villain. It's played out. Just go with somebody we haven't seen for a while, like Poison Ivy. Maybe you could do a compelling Mr. Freeze storyline. You have a plethora of villains in the comic books that have not been touched yet. And I feel like they have to go back into that territory like you did with the Riddler. Just give us something different because, you have this merger that just completed. It only takes one bad movie for this Zaslav guy to suddenly, pull the plug and decide to reboot this whole thing all over again. So, I mean, I look forward to it, but I'm just like, give me something different.
I am all for Condiment Man as the villain. I'm tired of him only being a joke in Harley Quinn and Lego Batman movies. He was a real villain.
Bring back the Mad Hatter.
That would be interesting. I mean, you could do Scarecrow, but you kind of used him, in the Nolan Batman movies, but he's still a compelling villain. I mean, I just don't want what most likely will be a Mr. Freeze movie. Because I'm like, we're just gonna get flashbacks to Arnold Schwarzenegger and bad puns. Maybe somebody really strange like Egghead. Nobody ever brings him back. Or like you said, the Mad Hatter isn't a bad choice. I mean, if you could do this, I would be afraid would be too much CGI. You could do a Clayface.
Clayface, Man-Bat. You have ideas. There are villains. There are plenty that they could do if they're done properly.
Well, you don't forget Killer Croc, but again, that might be a man versus monster movie then.
And Suicide Squad kind of ruined it, the first one.
Oh, yeah. I keep forgetting. I don't know why. It was a good movie, but I always forget Suicide Squad.
Was it really good, though?
It was satisfactory. Yeah, hey, I liked it. It was entertaining for what it was. We didn't pay for it. So you got what you got, okay? Next, we have Hawkeye series director Rice Thomas hired to direct live-action Robotech movie. This sounds just as exciting as that Hot Wheels project we were just talking about. I'm like, I watched Robotech as a kid. I don't remember that much about it because maybe because it was by the same studio. Robotech just reminds me of Voltron, which reminds me of all those Japanese animated shows where everything connected to make one really big, gargantuan, like kind of technological monster to fight real monsters, which then takes us back to Pacific Rim and just those types of movies. How do you feel about it?
I never watched the cartoon that much. I remember hearing so much about how violent it was and kids being kind of shocked with all the deaths on that show. This has been in development for years. As I recall, Tobey Maguire was going to produce and star in it years ago, and it didn't happen. So this is clearly a different take that they're going with. I mean, it depends on who directs it. If they decide they're going to make it as brutal as the cartoon, or if they're just going to lighten it up like Pacific Rim, it might be okay. I'll give it a shot.
Well, like I said, I didn't see Hawkeye, so I don't know how the action was in that movie. But whoever directed that series will be the director of this movie. Next, one of our favorite reoccurring trailers to talk about Top Gun Maverick, where now the trailers are showing just a little bit more footage, and it still seems just as like basic as the footage we've seen before. I mean, it's got great cinematography, don't get me wrong, and great aerial shots, but that seems to be about it, you know. And revelation that Iceman is, you know, the base commander who called Maverick in. Miles Teller and his mustache, more looking like Goose, his son, and more, you know, more clips of Jennifer Connelly. But again, you know, what is this movie really all about? You know?
I was trying to capture that era of fun and excitement and flying jets and guys playing volleyball. That's all they're really doing, and making a love letter to the late Tony Scott. I'm just more concerned about the returning characters because, yes, Iceman, we don't know if he's alive or dead based on just only showing his picture. And we know Val Kilmer's current condition. I can only imagine they probably just de-aged him somehow when something happens with this character. But I'm like, where's Tom Skerritt? Where's Rick Rossovich and some of the other actors who are still alive? Barry Tubb, like they're all still acting. Why not give them cameos in this movie? And then the weirdest thing that I found out the other day is that Meg Ryan's character has been recast with the girl from Uncle Buck who played the teenage daughter, which is like the weirdest situation. She's available. She's not as expensive as she was in the 90s, just had a little bit of Botox done to herself. You couldn't get her for 5 minutes to do a cameo as Miles Teller's mother?
Well, maybe it's more than 5 minutes. Maybe that's why, and they were afraid of her price. And they're already probably paying Tom Cruise, you know, out of the stratosphere to come back. And
I mean, I obviously know why they don't want Kelly McGillis back. I mean, well, I'm not even going to go there.
This just feels like a movie again. Maybe 20 years too late, you know, like,
yeah,
really, it seems more like Tom Cruise is the only person really excited about this movie. And it just makes me wonder if, you know, now that he's getting later in his career, if he's more concerned about doing sequels to, you know, past hits than, you know, any new material, because he's almost done everything at this point. And, you know, and
I
I
just
feel
look
like
at that
that's why
poster and it just feels like his ego has been dialed up to 11.
Well, I mean, especially with these Mission Impossible sequels we keep getting, where it's just like, watch Tom's new spectacular stunt in this movie. That
Yeah.
seems to be what these movies are more about than like plot or character anymore, you know? And so we'll see. It comes out next month, so we'll see what happens in the reviews for the next Top Gun Maverick. Next, we have CinemaCon, where other than Olivia Wilde being served court papers while on stage making a presentation, it was announced that there's going to be one of your favorite movies of last year, Ghostbusters Afterlife sequel. Your other favorite movie from earlier in this year, Venom 3. And one of my why do they need to make it, even though I like part 2, Equalizer 3 with Denzel Washington. And also a George Foreman biofilm.
So I guess just to quickly round robin this, Ghostbusters, I'm excited. I don't know what route they're going to take, if it's going to be the kids being trained by Ernie Hudson and Dan Aykroyd, or if they're going to add new recruits. I mean, it all depends on what they decide to do. I think they kind of left it open in directions at the end of that movie. I just, you know, what I don't want it to be is Easter eggs and nostalgia of, hey, member berries of this and that. I think it's got to be an original story with an original villain. You could have your nods to the second film, that's fine, but just try to make it its own thing and not constantly have to rely so much on the original. As far as Venom, I don't give a shit. Equalizer 3, I think that I was actually shocked that this was announced, because I thought once Queen Latifah did that show that was it for the movie franchise, but surprisingly we're getting another one. But it's got to be the last one. Denzel, you know, he's like 65 or a little older than that now, and I don't know where else you go with him. You know, they left it off of him in Cape Cod. It looked like he retired, so something else has to happen to lure him back. Um, they need to have a good villain this time, because Pedro Pascal was a little disappointing to me. I think they need Liam Neeson as the bad guy, and then it's going to be an event.
Well, for me, I'm sorry. Equalizer 3. I liked Equalizer 2 a lot more than I liked the first Equalizer, because at least I felt like, hey, this movie, at least there's a challenge. And, them killing off, a character from the first film. Venom 3 just feels like an attempt for Sony to keep trying to build their Spider-Man villain universe more than anything. Ghostbusters Afterlife sequel, I mean, I knew it was coming, but I was fine with just the Afterlife movie and, ending it. And the George Foreman biofilm, I just wonder, will the ending be when he starts making his money from the grills? Yeah, like his ultimate success and what he'll be remembered for, the grill,
Yeah, the George
But
Foreman movie, I mean, it might be okay depending on who plays the part. I don't want it to be corny. I think he's too good for that.
well, I mean, come on, his commercials are kind of corny.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I say, as an older George Foreman, Steve Harvey, just let him get in shape. This could be his dramatic role he's been waiting for all these years.
I'll say this, that grill got me through college.
Hey, everybody, there is nobody out there who has not had an experience or owned a George Foreman grill, no matter what size it was. So that is why this film needed to be made. If they can make a movie about Facebook, they can make a movie about George Foreman, his boxing career, and the grill that brought it all together. And I feel like I was in that pitch meeting almost there. Um, since we're going off of Ghostbusters, Aziz Ansari's latest directed movie has been halted in the middle of filming due to a misconduct charge against the film star Bill Murray, of all people. I'll admit, when I first heard this story, I was like, not Aziz Ansari again. But then it was like, Bill Murray? I mean, I know the man has unpredictable behavior, but this is a huge shock,
I mean, is this like a sexual misconduct or just misconduct in general? Because I mean, Bill's been in all kinds of situations. There's not one director I know of that ever goes and says, "Oh yeah, he was such a joy and a wonderful delight to work with." Every instance, this guy is always like getting into shoving matches or pulling pranks or getting into fights with the directors. Are you not surprised? But it's just that now in this climate, it only takes one little thing to get you canceled. So, a guy of his age doing the same shit that he was doing in 1984 ain't working anymore. It's just, it's a different, we are so sensitized now. It's crazy.
I mean, Sophia Coppola never complained about working with him. That's the only person I know who hasn't had complaints, except for maybe tracking him down. But other than that, I'm just like, I guess, like you said, we've all heard stories, but I'm shocked it went this far where they actually had to shut down production of a movie. You figured, oh, maybe it would come out like after the movie was made, sort of like Casey Affleck after he made his directorial debut with I'm Not There. But hopefully they do finish the movie somehow. I mean, it's one of his more dramatic works. So, and Seth Rogen is the co-star. So, who knows if they're going to scrap the movie, if they're just going to have to try and like refilm it with a different lead actor. Who knows? We'll see.
I think they'll work it out. People love Bill. He'll be fine.
Well, apparently not the person who made the misconduct charge does it. Unless it is made more like a financial thing where, or they come to an agreement. We'll see. I'm sure there's more news on this coming forth. Next, this is really a short story. David Lynch has a new surprise film debuting at Cannes starring Laura Dern. I am excited for this, considering it seemed like he was never really going to direct a narrative movie again. He always is working on projects, but it seemed like for a while Inland Empire was going to be his last film. A movie I'm not the biggest fan of, though it has its moments. I'm just hoping this next film will be more, let's say, narrative driven or more Lost Highway Mulholland Drive more than Inland Empire, personally.
Yeah, whatever it is, it's going to be very exciting to see David Lynch do a new project. And it would be an even greater surprise if The Secret Project was a new Twin Peaks movie or series, but I don't think that's happening for some time, maybe never, we don't know. But it would be a quite the surprise if that were to happen. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, him and Laura Dern, they've done a lot of good films together. Wild at Heart, that's one of my favorites of his. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
The man likes to work in the shadows. Next, Ezra Miller was arrested again, this time for second-degree assault. I think at this point, definitely, once the Flash movie comes out, this will be most likely the last time we will see him as the Flash.
I agree. I think from the sources that I've heard from, they're likely going to start looking for a new Flash after this film. I don't know if it's going to result in a reshoot or changing the ending or however way it's going to work, but this guy clearly needs help. He's got a problem, and it's just intolerable that the studio never pulled the plug on him with this role just because, they have all this money invested in these projects. It's got to stop. He just is a menace to society, really. Like you can't walk around the street around this guy without some shit going on. So yeah, it's bad. It is really bad for Warner Brothers.
And it's a shame because it's not like something like where you have the Jan Michael Vincent, where it's like, just stop drinking and everything will be fine. This is obviously something mental. So and the shameful thing is that I like Ezra Miller as an actor, and he had a lot of promise. And it just feels like, unfortunately, maybe not as bad, but another Shia LaBeouf situation where you have this great actor, but they have too many personal demons. And, even though so far we haven't heard any complaints of them on movie sets, it just seems like their personal life is so in shambles that you couldn't really hire them, especially if it's a project that has a lot of money involved in it. So
it's a shame, and I'm afraid like he could kill somebody.
I hope not, and I don't think it's that bad, but he definitely needs help. Next, we have Karen Kusama, a director of Jennifer's Body, among other things, and Aeon Flux. Her Dracula film, Mina Harker, was scrapped by Blumhouse. It was supposed to be, a horror film taken more from the point of the character of Mina Harker. And I mean, most recently, one of the reasons why I feel like that she probably got this project started is she directed one of your favorite shows that you always like to talk about, Yellow Jackets. And she directed episodes of that. And since that has proved to be a success for Showtime, but nobody's exactly saying why Blumhouse canceled the project. The only thing I could imagine, considering it seems like Blumhouse comes out with 20 films a year, could be that maybe the budget got too big, it being more probably a period piece. And, they're usually like modern day low budget horror films more than anything. And it's a shame because I feel like if you can make a really bad Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel, even though it went straight to Netflix, you can make a period piece, Mina Harker, maybe taken from a different point of view movie. And I don't know. What do you think?
I agree with you. I think it was a budgetary issue with the project. And, like you saw with Invisible Man, just the simplicity of it was enough to make it a huge success where it didn't have to be overly reliant on CGI. So maybe they thought they could go a similar route here, especially if it wasn't taking a point of view of the girl, not the monster. But yeah, I think they're going to go back to the drawing board, maybe modernize it, go with a different director, and then who knows? What are they going to build the Universal monsters again through Blumhouse? It's possible.
Oh, God,
so yeah, I mean, they'll find somebody, maybe like the Captain Marvel people. Who knows?
Well, it's a shame. I just like Karen Kusama as a director, so that's why it's especially a shame for me. I haven't liked every movie she's made, but for the most part, I usually like her movies. Speaking about another director, Andrew Dominik's Marilyn Monroe film Blonde is going to be released by Netflix later this year, but it's also rated NC-17. So, and they're not exactly telling us why it's rated NC-17, but I don't imagine it's for violence. So it's most likely, sexual material, maybe graphic, maybe nudity, maybe everything that was missing from a movie we'll talk about later in a review. I mean, I'm willing to go anywhere Andrew Dominic goes because I love each and every one of his films. So I'm looking forward to this film. I still would love to see a director's cut of the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. I'm probably even the handful of people who liked Killing Me Softly with Brad Pitt that he directed. And of course, he directed episodes of Mindhunter and spilled the beans that if they had gotten another season or in future seasons, it would be the Mindhunters going to work with Hollywood on, films based on serial killers. So how are you feeling about this news?
I feel it's probably the most appropriate direction to take a Marilyn Monroe story. Just from all the stories we've heard, with all the affairs and the controversies of her life, certainly the way things ended for her, you could do it as a heavy duty R-rated picture, but I think if you really want to go the extra mile to make this a compelling biopic and not just something that's sanitized, I think this is the right way to go. And I think Ana de Armas is going to be very interesting in the part. I kind of look forward to seeing what her take is going to look like.
Yeah, because I know, a lot of people were shocked with her casting in the first place. But, I'm like, hey, if you're going to make a movie about like one of the most beautiful women in the world, and she is quite a beauty and has the talent to match and is the right age, hey, maybe this will be really her breakout role other than Knives Out, Next, we have, I guess this isn't sad, but shocking news that Tandy Newton dropped out of Magic Mike 3 after a week of filming. Everybody likes to drop out after a week, I noticed, and is being replaced by Salma Hayek. Now, reportedly, again, rumors are that Tandy Newton dropped out over arguing with Channing Tatum over, of all things, the Will Smith Chris Rock slap. But there are other rumors about maybe she's having kind of her own midlife crisis or mental problem because she's also supposedly divorcing her husband at the same time and putting out these mysterious, enigmatic messages on Instagram. And then some people are even saying she's going to rehab, but not specifying what for. So, I mean, again, this is more, we don't exactly know the exact reasons, but we just know that she dropped out of the film. And, the thing that's killing me here is that there's a Magic Mike 3 coming out. And the fact that this has gotten such controversy over this movie of all things. It's like, out of all the people you would think that maybe Tandy Newton wouldn't agree with, I'm like, Channing Tatum? It's not like he's a poster boy for conservatism or anything. He seems to be very woke. So I was like, what? And if the problem truly was the Chris Rock Will Smith slap, I'm like, really? Out of all the things you can disagree about,
Well, I'm trying to think. Was she defending Will or was she like defending Chris Rock?
That's the whole thing. We don't know. We just know there was supposedly a disagreement about that. And of all people, Channing Tatum was the one who walked off,
Because I know she worked with Will on The Pursuit of Happiness. She plays the wife that leaves him. So it could be possible she might have had a little bit of defense for him. But also, too, let's not forget that Tandy Newton has been lately notorious for kind of spilling the beans on her past projects and not being exactly satisfied with her work, especially on Mission Impossible 2 and a number of other movies where, she's making it clear, like, things were not quite as rosy as they looked on screen. So I feel like something definitely happened here. Maybe she was out of her depth in a movie about a bunch of Chippendales and, realized this is not artistic for me. And, maybe wanted to go back to Westworld or something. I don't know. But it's a very weird situation any way you look at it.
Yes, because I'm like, this is a woman who's been in numerous Tyler Perry movies. So it's like, it's like Channing Tatum's the one you had a problem with, never Tyler Perry.
And you never had a problem with Eddie Murphy on Norbit, but only after you wrote an op-ed about your issues with the fat shaming.
But I'm just like, I mean, that's why I'm like, when you said like maybe she wasn't reaching her artistic depth on a Magic Mike 3 movie, and I'm like, but she's totally fine with Norbit, you know, like I understood my character there. This Magic Mike 3 script makes no sense. It's Tatum. What's my character's motivation? You know, like you're into me. That's your motivation. And I'm like, even though I've never really seen any of these movies, will they be returning characters from part 1 for part 3 who weren't in part 2?
I don't know, Kevin Nash.
I'm like, I know Jada Pinkett was in part 2, so again, will she be in part 3? And Danny Newton was like, hell no, not in my movie. You know, so who knows? It's like until eventually she spills the beans or the studio spills the beans, this could be a whole Ray Fisher Justice League thing where we keep getting everybody's news leaked. So we'll see. And for our final, well, close to final story, Lee Daniels is directing a Sammy Davis Jr. movie with Elijah Kelly starring. And I'm down for this because Lee Daniels did okay with, you know, the Billie Holiday movie. So I'm interested in seeing, you know, this project, especially if he can do it well, because as I've always said, it seems that every time Lee Daniels makes a film, he gets better as a director. So, you know, since he still obviously he can still, there's room for him to grow. Hopefully, maybe this will be the film. And he's got a great subject, you know, Sammy Davis Jr., very long career. So it's like, as long as they don't make the same mistake they make with so many biopics of trying to put the whole career and life in one film, maybe just stick it to like, okay, this piece of time to this piece of time. Because like even with the Billie Holiday movie, they were smart. You know, we saw her upbringing, but we didn't end when she died so much, but more focus on how Strange Fruit and the FBI kind of more affected her career than anything. You know, we didn't need to know each and everything that happened to her in her life. How do you feel about this project?
I'm okay with it. I know of Elijah Kelly from the New Edition story, and he definitely looks like he could play Sammy Davis Jr. You know, the only real competition you have is Don Cheadle from the Rat Pack movie from HBO, which he was also very good in. But I think he'll be fine. And, you know, Lee Daniels, you know, is going to stack it up with an all-star cast.
Yeah.
Please do not cast Ansel Egfert as Frank Sinatra, because then it's going to suck.
Well, Ansel Elgort seems to be working again, so I won't say that's that far from reality. So, but you know, I look forward to this project. You know, hopefully, you know, maybe he'll be good enough, like the woman who played Billie Holiday, and this will be like, you know, Elijah Kelly will get an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. Who knows? And our last story, unfortunately, we might have mentioned this on a previous show, but Gilbert Godfrey passed away recently at the age of 67. And, you know, he's a very well-known comedian. Everybody's seen him in something here or there. And I have to say, I am shocked at how much or how hard his death is hitting me personally, because he was somebody I grew up with, you know, not personally, obviously, but, you know, who I grew up with seeing in things as I grew up. You know, I remember him as, you know, a voice in Aladdin, many other voiceovers, because that seemed to like pave the way for him doing voiceover work. I mean, his little cameo in Beverly Hills Cop 2, his cameo on The Cosby Show. I mean, even the Problem Child movies.
Yeah.
You know, Problem Child 2, one of the most disgusting movies I've ever seen, but I still remember him from that movie. And I mean, he was just in everything. I mean, he was in How to Be a Player, the infamous Bobcat Goldthwait Dabney Coleman movie, Hot to Trot, you know, House Party 3.
Yeah, for Fairlane.
Oh, that to me, which is his best movie role ever, because he's playing a shock jock. But I think that is the first time you actually hear how he normally sounds when he talks, when he's not yelling or screeching. So that was always a revelation. and you kind of felt sorry for his character,
Yeah.
before his inevitable death. Spoiler alert for
Yeah,
if
I
you
was
haven't seen
shocked
it.
as a kid when that happened.
I mean, and not to mention, pardon my language, his line, "Holy my fucking Christ," instead of "Holy Christ." And I mean, you can see all of his talk show appearances online, which are hilarious because he truly did not give a F. And the same thing with his when he was on The Apprentice with Donald Trump. I mean, hey, he was always working, and I grew up watching Up All Night on Saturday nights when
Yeah.
he hosted.
Ron
So
Shear.
yeah, Ron this year was on Friday, Gilbert was on Saturday. And I remember the movies, but I remember his like introductions and jokes during the commercial breaks just as much. And it's like he is going to be widely missed. One of the funniest Friars Club comics. And I just started recently listening to his podcast and finding out how much of a classic movie fan he was, which was shocking, and how much of respect he had for all those old actors. And I mean, he probably would always be inappropriate, but if you watch a very good documentary on him titled Gilbert, which I think is available on Amazon, you really get to see his more personal life. Like you find out how like cheap he was, where he'd even take napkins from places to take home. You see his wife, you see him with his kids, you see him, more soft spoken, his day-to-day life. And it's just really a loss. Even though, when you're thinking of Hollywood, his name isn't the first that comes up, but you realize how much he meant to the Hollywood community and just people in general, And I kick myself that I never got to see him do stand-up.
Yeah, I think he hit all the points. I would also go as far as to say just like three little anecdotes about Gilbert Godfrey. So one of my friend Albert, he actually saw him perform in the city and said that he was freaking hilarious. Like he was just one of the funniest people he'd ever seen do stand up. Also, another actor friend of mine, Richard Lampone, who was in my film Vendetta Games, he had directed him in a movie called Genderbender, and said nothing but glowing things about him. He was the first person I thought about when he passed away because he had such a good experience working with him in such a small role. And also, you mentioned the House Party sequel that he was in, and you talk about like how cheap he was. He did his scene for like a couple of hours and then he was back on the plane. Like he just didn't care. Like you could pay the guy whatever, he'll show up and he'll do his thing and be entertaining like he would be on any movie or any stand-up show, and then just go home. And I used to think when I was a kid that I thought he was Asian for a long time. I really thought because of the eyes and everything, like just the way he came across, I thought he was actually Asian. And then not till later I realized he was Jew. But like he was so many memorable performances in anything that he did, especially in Aladdin, the Affleck commercials before some shit happened. He got fired for some reason, but he was amazing and such a funny guy. It's gonna suck without him. We lost too many funny people this year. It's really like this year just blows.
I mean, and he had a recurring role on even Law and Order SVU as their tech expert on that show.
I forgot about
non-comedic
that.
role. Yeah, non-comedic for him. So it's a great loss, and big bucket of win. He was just a great guy. I mean, some people obviously didn't like him because they found him so offensive, but that was the beauty of him. He didn't give a crap. He knew who he was, and he knew they were jokes. They weren't coming from a place of hate or anything like that. So, rest in peace to Gilbert Godfrey. And after such a down subject, now we go to the review. First up, we are going to talk about the latest movie starring the one, the only, an unfinished business favorite, Nicolas Cage, with his new movie, not that he directed it, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, where Nicolas Cage plays Nicolas Cage, who is hired to appear at a South American olive company head's birthday party, and who is the world's biggest Nicolas Cage fan, but he's also kind of implemented by the CIA, FBI to go undercover to help them bust this guy, because they believe that not only is he, a crime lord, but also they kidnapped a politician's daughter just so this politician will drop out, and he's not cartel friendly. Now, having said all that, me and Mr. Joseph saw this movie together. I will let Andre go first with his review, and then I will express my feelings towards the movie.
I thought it was funny as hell. I felt it was, on one hand, a love letter to the man and his work. You see it all throughout the movies with Pedro Pascal's character, citing all of his films, having all the memorabilia in his house, and just generally like really infatuated with him, much like a lot of moviegoers are when it comes to Nicolas Cage. And at the same time, I like that he's in on the joke. It's not just, we're bashing a man who's been spending the last couple of years doing a bunch of bad movies, with some exceptions, but it's really like, this is a guy who's in on the joke. Yes, he's eccentric. Yes, he has weird tastes and, takes on roles that are sometimes very offbeat, but he still gives his all, no matter what the price range is for him in that project. He is just an icon. And I love all those scenes, especially the angle of him talking to himself, but it's like a de-aged Nicolas Cage from like the Valley Girl era, and the back and forth that they have is like some of the most hilarious stuff that I've seen on screen. And Pedro Pascal was charming and lovely in this movie. You think he's going to be going one way as a character, and then it turns out not to be. Like, he's likable all the way through. And the only issue I had with it, honestly, was the third act. I was kind of drifting off a little bit, because you have a subplot where Nicolas Cage is so caught up in his career that he's divorced. He has kind of a strained relationship with his daughter, which we've seen millions of times in other movies. And they end up in the plot where they end up supposedly being taken to this villa and get into the crosshairs of the bad guys in the film. So it's one of those things where it's like, we're just adding this jeopardy, and it kind of loses a little bit of steam, but it's not, it picks itself back up before it's over, which I like. And then the other issue I had was Tiffany Haddish. And I'm going to tell you why, because I thought about this after we saw the movie. So she's the CIA operative that recruits Cage when she tells him, hey, this guy that's invited you to his little birthday shindig is actually an arms dealer that we're going after. And she gets her funny moments. She plays up her fake fandom of Nick Cage and like only liking his kid movies like The Croods too. And then trying, like, I love the scene when he's trying to avoid the bad guys, like he's trying to get some information, and then he accidentally smears himself with like that finger paint stuff that causes him to start like almost going out of consciousness, and then they sort of redo the scene from The Rock at the end of the movie. So I thought that was funny, but there was a point, without spoiling the film, where she flat out disappears with no explanation, and that kind of struck me as odd. Like, I felt she was going to be more prominent, and then all of a sudden we just took her out, and it didn't really make much sense to me. Otherwise, I loved it. I would recommend the film.
I would recommend the film. I didn't love it as much as you did. Okay. I thought it was funny throughout, but I think I have the opposite, well, not the opposite problem, but the opposite idea you have. I just felt with Nicolas Cage being in on the joke, it kind of messed it up a little, because I just felt like he, as always, he's giving 100%, but I feel like he is trying to play up the comedy more rather than being committed so much, even though he's playing himself. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like he was going to try to be farcical rather than just staying grounded as himself. And I guess that was my it's a minor problem, but it was something that irked me throughout. And like you said, because there are plenty of scenes where he's hilarious. Like you said, the when he takes the accidentally puts the stuff on his face and he's starting to lose consciousness. That scene is like pure comedic gold, throughout. But I also had the same problem you did with Tiffany Haddish's character, and it's not exactly her fault because my thing is she's good in the initial scene when she's going to meet Nicolas Cage for the first time and in recruiting him. But it was like after that, she didn't really have anything to do. Like you could have hired any other actor just to play that role if that was what you were going to do. And then you play her up as an important character. And then, like you said, towards the end, her character disappears and then is totally out of the movie. And, we get no real, like, any payoff or any emotions for it. It's just like, oh, yeah, okay, she's gone.
Yeah.
And the other thing, like you said, is that third act. To me, it wasn't the whole family situation, because obviously that's at its dramatic heart for him to try to be a better person. And I thought it was inventive the way they made it seem like they were coming there more for an emotional therapy session for them to write this screenplay, and he's thinking, oh, he's trying to hold them hostage over me because he knows that I'm undercover or something like that. But this is where the problem of the movie exists for me also, is that in Act 3, I don't feel like this is the first time director making the film.
Yeah.
And the action sequences weren't that great.
No, they weren't.
It was just like, it wasn't like if you had maybe a more skilled, or not even a more skilled, but maybe a veteran director, like at the end when they do the infamous Michael Bay shot, it would have been a little more obvious rather than the shot that you get watching the film. I know that's more of a film geek thing, but that bothered me, obviously. And I mean, I loved Sharon Horgan playing his ex-wife because, I love her television shows, Catastrophe. She's a great writer, great actress. Plus, I like her little accent. And, it's never explained, why did he marry a woman with such a strange accent? And then later in the film, she has to act like she doesn't have an accent in the film. So I thought that was like strange, but good. I like that they pepper various Nicolas Cage movies into their dialogue, like Guarding Tess is very important in the film, and the National Treasure movies. But, sometimes you're like sitting there, why didn't Vampire's Kiss get a shout out?
Or Xander Lee.
I mean, obviously, maybe this was made before Pig, so that didn't get a shout out.
Yeah.
But I'm like, Valley Girl? No. None of the films he worked on with his uncle? No Rumblefish?
That's a missed opportunity I felt when I was watching it, because when they first did the scene with him in the car with the Valley Girl Nicolas Cage, I thought, okay, that's cool, that's funny, but you could have had other scenes with that same character, but make it a different role, like the Peggy Sue Got Married part, and he could do the freaking voice again, have him do the Moonstruck character, have him do, like, I don't know, Honeymoon in Vegas, like have him do his iconic roles talking to himself. And it's still a good film. I still enjoyed it. I just think you could have gone the extra mile. His whole filmography is so rich. You could have had other moments of other movies that people remember him from, not just the big blockbusters from the 90s.
Yeah, and it felt weird because since you say I'm a fan of artsy fartsy film, it could have gone, more of an artistic Being John Malkovich way.
Yeah.
And it didn't, and it chose not to. So it's more of a studio film, but you could also tell it must have a low budget because we're sticking with all the same locations. And, there's like no cameos from like other famous actors he's worked with or who might be his friends.
Okay, so about that, because I was reading about this before we came on. So apparently there were plans to have a number of celebrities cameoing. I think Quentin Tarantino was one. There were a few. He was the one that I noticed the most, but they were shooting during COVID. So a lot of those actors weren't able to do it, except for Demi Moore and David Gordon Green, which I'm not going to spoil what their roles are. They're not even really that big of a deal, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess I was looking more for that. I was looking for more like the player type satire.
Yeah.
And here they were like, let's just go broad, as broad as Nicolas Cage's movies or performances usually are. So, well, at least that explains a few things, like why it feels so small scale when it should feel a little bit better. I also think they missed out on a good musical sequence when Nicolas Cage plays piano. Because I'll be honest, I thought he was going to do a song from Face Off, honestly, when he got to the piano. And it was just like, oh, just something he supposedly wrote himself. It was like, okay, you know. But like I said, I think if you are definitely even just kind of a minor Nicolas Cage fan, I think you will enjoy the movie overall. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you to rush out and go see it either. I think you can personally, I think you can wait. And that's my opinion.
Yeah.
But once it is on a streaming network, I think then it's worth seeing. But then again, since I'm also promoting people going to the movies, just see it, you know. It also doesn't help that I have the last two movies I've seen are near classics, and then I watched this. So it's like, yeah, this doesn't approach that. So that's why I'm like, you know, it could be better, but I still think it's a good movie. So that is our review for The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, starring the one, the only, Nicolas Cage. So on to our next review. Our next review, it's a little older than some of the movie we just reviewed. We're going to talk about Red Rocket, written and directed by Sean Baker, and starring and the return of Simon Rex, who some of you might remember as a VJ on MTV all those years ago, or for some other eagle-eyed. He was also in the Scary Movie franchise. I don't know how many of those because I stopped watching after part 2, so I couldn't tell you. But also, if you ever watch the Amanda Bynes series, What I Like About You, he also starred in that. This film is basically about a, I guess, porn pimp, you could say, you know, suitcase pimp, who basically loses everything in Los Angeles and has to go back to his hometown of Texas and tries to live with his ex-wife, who he made basically a porn star, and now she's retired and trying to live a normal life. And he goes there supposedly to hide out and start a new life, but it's only a amount of time before he spots what he thinks is new talent, and he basically starts grooming this girl to be his new porno actress. This movie is it's subversive because at one point you really think he's turned over a new leaf and is going to do things more positive. But then in the third act, there's a twist there, which throws everything off, but it kind of throws everything off for the better because it makes the film feel more realistic than this whole, oh, he's a horrible person but has a heart of gold and might turn over a new leaf, or he might decide, you know, to be a decent human being. And the third act really shows, unfortunately, some people just don't change no matter what. And what I like about the film, well, I love all Sean Baker films, even though this film isn't his strongest, I would say, out of all the films he's made. But this film, what I find interesting always is his casting of non-actors, because they give grounded performances because they don't come with any baggage from movies you might have seen them in before. So it feels always fresh and new. And they seem like they feel more realistic. The only time in this movie that feels like a false note, but it's for a comedic reason, is when the girl he's trying to groom, her boyfriend's family comes to fight him. And, you know, they're all like kind of thugged out. And I was like, this feels more of an invention of comedy than something natural. But other than that, the film is, you know, worth watching. Great drama. Didn't know Simon Rex had this type of performance in him. I will admit, the sex scenes are a little disturbing, even though in real life the actress is 25, but she looks so young. She really does look like a teenager. So that is some hard watching. And I also appreciate the film for its many uses of an NSYNC song throughout. I'm not the biggest NSYNC fan, but that song is catchy as hell. Andre, what did you think of Red Rocket?
So I went into it thinking it was going to be a straight comedy, and then once I realized it was sort of like the mix of a comedy and a drama, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little depressed by it, especially by the end when this guy clearly is not going to go anywhere with his life. And I felt like Simon Rex was very good. Overall, I love the cinematography. I did like the fact that there were very natural performances in it and just the absurdity of his situation. But yeah, it just was like you said, the relationship between him and the young girl working in the
Yes.
donut shop is so uncomfortable to watch. It
Yes.
is like, I know she's of age, but the way that she looks to him, and he's like probably like 40, 50 something, it just is like, ugh, I can't. It's just so hard to watch. And and then see him like kind of get his comeuppance near the end with the weed dealer and have to give them their money back. It was just, I'm not saying like, look, every movie that I have to watch has to be uplifting and have like a nice wraparound, but this was just like, it starts kind of down and goes further down for me. And I can't recommend it for anybody. It wasn't really my cup of tea.
I will admit it's very disturbing. It's very uncomfortable. I will say, it's hard because again, I like the director and I like his movies. I'm not going to say I wouldn't recommend it, but I would give a strong warning for those who want to watch the film. Like, I warn you, if you've seen a Sean Baker film before, you know what you're in for. It's going to have comedic moments, but like you said, it's going to be very serious and down. And if you feel like you can handle that, definitely go for it. But also, if you think you might be uncomfortable with that type of scene, those sexual scenes, maybe this isn't the type of film for you or not the film for you. So having said that, like I said, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's good filmmaking, but I can understand I understand you not recommending it, and I can understand why some people might not like this movie. So, and the one thing I will say above all else is that Simon Rex gives a great performance throughout. Because the whole thing is, I've never seen somebody with so much energy on screen who's not on something. Because his character is just like a rabbit, always jumpy, just so enthusiastic no matter what is happening. I think maybe if he was in a Harmony Korine film, maybe that would have been maybe a little more natural for him. But like I said, I could see why people were pushing for him for a Best Actor nomination, but I don't think half the voters would have sat through this movie. So that is a sort of recommend with reservations from me and a no recommendation from Andre. So we're going to go to our next, which is the oldest film on our review list right now, which is West Side Story, the remake, directed by Steven the Spielberg. I'm going to say something. I saw this theatrically, first of all, not by choice. It was just, hey, it's out. Why not check it out? Because I am not a huge fan of the original West Side Story. I respect it, but I can't say it's my idea of a good time. So, having said that, I went into this film and I absolutely loved it, surprisingly. I was like, this is so much better than the original. Maybe it's because a little bit more of a modern take. Maybe it's because, it feels like the song and dance sequences, while they're still amazing and obviously theatrical, but I felt like here it didn't make it seem like, oh, all of these people are professional dancers. It didn't seem effortless. It looked like they put in the work and were really enjoying themselves while doing it. Plus, I felt like most of the actors gave really strong performances. I thought, of course, Ariana DeBose stole the movie in her role. I thought Mike Faint playing, the Irish gang leader, who is the best friends of Ansel Elgort's character, I thought he gave an equally great performance. I even thought David Alvarez as Ariana DeBose's boyfriend was really strong in his role. Unfortunately, when we get to the leads,
Yeah.
Ansel Elgort is passable. You know, it's like he really had. He's the lead, but he doesn't bring anything to the role except for a weird hairstyle. And Rachel Ziegler is good in her role. The problem is, compared standing next to any of the other actors, she looks all of 14. You know, and she's supposed to be kind of a lit. I know she's supposed to be a teenager, but she should at least look a little more adult. This is the only time where I'm like, I know she's a teenager, but couldn't we find somebody who looks older to play the role? So, especially when, you know, even though there's no love scene, but there's an implied scene where, you know, they wake up in bed next to each other. It's like, ew, did we step into Red Rocket territory again? You know? But other than that, I thought everything was great about. I like the big production feeling of the film, even though it doesn't feel as much on, you know, a sound set. I even liked Corey Stahl's, you know, minor character as the police captain. I guess he's Officer Krupski, even though they don't sing that song. You know, I like that they had kind of a tomboy transgender character in the background who plays a pivotal role. I don't remember the name of the character who has the gun, who's hunting for Tony through the third act. I just felt like that was a nerd stereotype with that character. But you know what? I haven't felt this happy and satisfied by a Steven Spielberg movie in a long time. So my hat is off to Steven Spielberg with this movie, because this is the movie where he shows his natural born filmmaking instincts. And you can see he has a passion more for this than, let's say, that Tom Hanks movie about the spies and the lawyer.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I felt his heart was in this a lot more than it's been in films for a long time. This was his Scorsese moment. So that is how I felt about the remake of West Side Story. What are your thoughts on it?
I'll get this out of the way real quick before I get into my review, but I'm still very pissed off that they took out my friend Reggie L. Barnes' dialogue scene as one of the detectives interrogating the gang members. So I'll just put it there. I'll stop right there, because he did have some silent parts in there, but they did him dirty. So I liked it. I liked the cinematography. It had that sort of poppiness like the original did with the colors and the overall vibe of New York in that period. Anna DeBose, she stole the show, and I predicted she was going to win the Oscar, and she did so. She's definitely the best thing about this picture. The music is hot. The dance choreography is top notch. In a lot of ways, like you say, it's a far superior film to the original, which, you know, was a different time and stunt casting and things like that. But I agree, the leads are the issue of this picture. Rachel Ziegler not only looks too young, but every time I look at her, I'm reminded of Brooke Adams from The Dead Zone and the Invasion of Body Snatchers. She looks like the splitting image of her. And Mr. Igor, you know, he, like you said, he's passable. He's passable for Tony. At times, I thought he was like a young Liam Neeson in certain angles. It just was like the weirdest thing. So he's okay, but he's not the best thing about this picture. He kind of brings it down personally. And you didn't mention Rita Moreno in the film, but she also was a delight to see at her age, still being able to deliver the emotion and the heart of the picture and kind of creating that bridge between the original and this remake. So I think overall it's a wonderful film. You know, yeah, it didn't do so hot box office wise, but if you put that aside, yes, Steven Spielberg's passion is all through it from start to finish. And there is an ending. There's not multiple endings. It's just like the original play. And yeah, you know, it's like, this is what he's been born to do this type of story. And given like the very divisive climate that we're in, it's the perfect movie to do at this time. So yeah, I feel it's one of his better movies in over a decade, I would say.
Yeah, I did. I'm sorry I left out Rita Moreno, which is, I think they even wrote an original song which is not in the original, just for her.
Yes,
for
they
this
did.
movie. So and I mean, she did well, especially in the scene where Ariana DeBose is trying to deliver a message, and then she's almost like gang raped, and she's yelling at them, but she's pointing out she should be the one who should be the most ashamed of herself, considering she's supposed to be on more the Puerto Rican side, and she more serves the whites. So I thought, wow, even though West Side Story was supposed to be like an interracial story back when it was made, that statement right there was the thing that really made the film come home more in a modern audience. So I really felt like that was a very strong statement to make. And, like I said, Steven Spielberg, my respect and hats off to you, because I'm like you said, this is probably one of the best films he's made in the last 10 years. And, this is one of the films that I would say, he's already been given Lifetime Achievement Award, but this would definitely be part of, that reel, because I'm like, you did something that many people have tried, but you actually succeeded at. You made a film better than the original, So I give him the utmost respect for that. Now we may get to our final review, which will not be as glowing as the review we just gave. We are talking, people, about Adrian Lynn's latest erotic thriller. Might be his last film he ever makes, too, unfortunately, because of his age. We're talking about Deep Water, which stars Ben Affleck and Ana de Armas as a married couple who have an open relationship that seems oddly one-sided. And, I was going to say Rita Moreno. And Ana de Armas' boyfriends keep coming up either missing or murdered. And Ben Affleck's character always jokes about killing them, but it might seem like he's not joking. Again, this is actually based on an Agatha Christie story. And it's written by Sam Levinson of Euphoria fame. And I can't remember. I think Zach Helm is the other screenwriter who wrote Mr. Megorium's Magic Emporium with Dustin Hoffman. I'm going to let you, because I have many things to say about this movie. So I'm going to let Andre, you start off. What are your thoughts on Deep Water?
I think this movie had a lot of missed opportunities overall. First of all, the legendary Adrian Lyne, the man behind Flashdance, Fatal Attraction, Indecent Proposal, hell, I'll even say Foxes. This guy is a visual stylist, and yet this movie looks average. It just looks like any other thriller that you would make in this modern era. There's nothing stylish about it. I feel like it could have almost been a comedy instead of a drama because of just
it wasn't a comedy.
I mean, look, there were those moments you would have thought, like, you have the guy from Get Out, like it could have gone that way, and you could have made this thing more humorous, and and then you have Ben Affleck basically doing his sad face Ben Affleck all throughout this picture, which now makes me say, this is the biggest missed opportunity of this entire picture that would have made a huge difference, would have boosted box office, and would have gotten some controversy. Will Smith should have done this film. It would have been art imitating life. And he would have gotten a second Oscar nomination for this movie because it is just so intense. I'm going to go there. This is the movie he should have done. And you know what? I'm not even going to say Jada should have played the Ana de Armas role, because she's the best thing about this film, hands down, like just performance and everything else. Like, she's the only real standout. But the rest of this movie, my God, even the people who die one by one, who have some relationship with her or happen to know about, whatever's really going on with these deaths, it is just freaking comedic. It is not a serious picture. Brian De Palma could have made this movie and it would have been like a sequel to Raising Cain, which was also intended to be more of a comedy than a thriller. That's how bad this movie is. It is the biggest disappointment in the history of Adrian Lyne's career. And it sucks if this is his final film, because I don't think he'll ever be able to make such a great movie ever again.
Well, yeah, maybe Unfaithful should have been his swan song. But, you know, what else does he have to do? So,
he makes commercials in Europe. That's how he makes his money.
Well, he should have stayed doing that, maybe. He was like, I need to tell a story in more than 2 minutes. You know? But I will say this for this movie. I could have done a deep dive on this movie alone, because there's just so many things to dissect and take apart. I even commented to you after we saw the movie X. Like, this movie lacks a scene that X had, which is where after a character's girlfriend performs in an adult movie, he's in the shower crying because of, you know, what he feels is betrayal. And Ben Affleck never does that during this film. He just puffs and puffs, and that is supposed to be us understanding how sad he is throughout this movie, other than his constant sad face. But for the most part, Ben Affleck plays the same character from Gone Girl in this movie, except without his own affairs. You know, that was the film. That was another fault in the film storytelling, that I felt like we should understand this open relationship policy, other than her saying, "Oh, well, if I didn't have these affairs, you'd be bored of me eventually." You know, it's like, did he cheat in the past and it was okay, and she's getting her revenge now? What was, you know, and it's an erotic thriller that only has one real brief sex scene in it. Everything else is sex is hinted at or imagined. And look, you know, Ana de Armas is a beautiful woman, and maybe I understand supposedly them living upstate, there's not that many choices, but could you find better looking guys for her to cheat with? Because I was like, all these, like, except for maybe one guy, I'm like, Ben Affleck's still better looking than all of these guys.
I mean, it was like these old Sade videos where, like, she's freaking gorgeous, and yet the boyfriends they put around her are like these ugly English dudes. Who's doing the casting for this movie?
It was like the most basic people you could find were cast as her quote unquote lovers. Because again, it's always hinted at. And I mean, you have little Ralph from Get Out, whereas all their friends, do they just think she's heavily flirting, or do they know, like he knows, no, she's fucking all these guys? Because they never say anything. They're just like, hey, man, it's nothing, you know? And it's like, are we supposed to mention all of this? And you say she's one of the best parts of the movie, because literally they should have just wrote femme fatale all on her forehead, because that's what she is throughout. Ben Affleck, they should have just called this cuckold the movie, you know. And I will give special mention to the guy who takes the Columbo role of the movie. This guy who writes mystery novels, who suspects Ben Affleck, but does the worst job of covering up his true feelings. Where so far as he even hires a private detective himself, but at the end has one of the funniest death scenes I've ever seen in a movie.
You know, the other thing about it too is, like, okay, the public, especially women, do not want to see Ben Affleck fornicating on screen. It's not a pretty sight. And secondly, what the hell was up with the snails? Does this guy eat snails, or he's just like a fanatic collector of snails that live under his house? That made no sense. I didn't get that correlation with him watching his wife fucking a bunch of dudes and being mad about it.
Well, maybe that was like their artistic license of the film. It was like, hey, he can't be a total killer. This man takes care of snails, you know, and gets insulted when they joke about eating them. And he's like, oh, now that's how you knew that guy was going to die. He's like, you want to eat my snails? You fuck my wife and you want to eat my snails? You know? And I didn't understand the point of I understand, like, with Unfaithful, it was spoiler, it was an accidental killing at the end because his emotions got the best of him. But in this movie, we know one person he killed. they still never answer the question, did he kill the guy in the pool? And we're still wondering about her friend who disappeared. None of that is answered, you know? So it's like, and are we supposed to be rooting for Ben Affleck to get away with all of this? That's where it felt like, okay, these are obviously Alfred Hitchcock touches, but again, I guess it's up to the audience. Do we want to like this character and feel sorry for him? Or should he be reprehensible? But the whole thing is, we can't like Ana de Armas because she's openly having these affairs, you know, in front of his face.
I'm like, the only person that's likable is the daughter, and she hates the mother.
And they make this big point at the end of like her packing the bags and leaving him, and then the daughter just like gets rid of the bags, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess I won't leave.
And I'm thinking the daughter's gonna like drown in the pool. Like you're trying to set this whole weird thing up with her as they're about to leave the house. And I'm thinking there's gonna be some tragic consequence for all the craziness that's going on. It's like, no, she just drops luggage in a pool just so she could stop them from leaving. I don't get it. This guy has done better scripts. I mean, other than Flashdance. Flashdance is just Rocky with stripping, but Fatal Attraction was a genius project. That movie could have gone a different way. I know they're trying to do a TV show of it now, but if you didn't make Michael Douglas's character sympathetic with the wife and the daughter, then it would have made the movie a piece of shit. You know, like you would have just sympathized with Glenn Close, but you had to make her crazy enough to hate her and see her get shot at the end by Ann Archer. Here, there's nobody to identify with. Nothing connects. Nothing makes sense. And then, yeah, the hero, the Columbo guy you're talking about who could like blow the whole thing wide open, he dies senselessly. And I'm clapping at the end because of this. Like, I don't like this guy anymore.
Well, here's Deepwater. First of all, for an erotic thriller, it needed more sex and nudity. That's you know, even if it wasn't Ana de Armas's character, I don't know how, but throw in some nudity for somebody else. Maybe he accidentally peeps on somebody, because it's a largely sexless erotic thriller.
Wasn't there like the blonde girl that he was talking to that it looked like he was going to have a thing with her?
Yeah, that was the other Columbo's wife.
Yeah, that would have been fascinating if he had a fling with her.
But instead, no, they just share a dance, and she's nice to him. That's about it.
Yeah. What the fuck?
And also, I didn't understand if Ana de Armas is going so far as to tell the detectives, no, my husband killed this dude. Why is he still living at home with him? And you know, and then when she's having lunch with the detective, he just comes up and she just laughs it off like, ha, ha, ha. I'm like that, which made me wonder, does she have a mental illness? Or like they never say she's a nymphomaniac in the film. Is that what it is? Because you know, they keep saying, oh, she's a free spirit. I can see if she was a free spirit and artistic, but she's just a free spirit, and they won't call her a gold digger because Ben Affleck has all this money, so he doesn't have to go to work every day. You know, so it's just like, you know, all he does is ride a mountain bike through most of it and raise his nails.
Jada Pinkett syndrome. I hate to say it, but that's what it is.
I don't know. I am not in that household, so I can't say that is how their life is. If you go with rumors and gossip, maybe. But as far as this film goes, it's like you said, there's just a lot of missed opportunity. But in its own way, it's entertaining because it's so bad it becomes entertaining because you're like, you'll sit throughout the movie coming up with your own ideas for this movie while you watch it, and they use none of them, you know?
This is the movie that I believe Tommy Wiseau envisioned when he wrote The Room.
But at least Adrian Lin can direct it better. I'm going to go out on a limb with casting, though. This is the Nicolas Cage movie we've been waiting for. I would like to see Nicolas Cage play the husband because there wouldn't have been all this contained, you know, unhappiness. He would have taken it out, you know. You could still keep Ana de Armas, but I just want Nicolas Cage, you know.
And the snails would have made sense.
But I feel like then we would have gotten a weird scene where he snorts them for some reason.
He likes a fine piece of glass. Why not make chocolate snails and eat them?
That could be his character's like every time he confronts her, like, oh, I was just having some escargot. You know?
The scene writes itself.
Exactly. And I'm going to go out on a limb with him, have him still have a ponytail. So we can really make it seem like it's the 1980s, like all over. But would you recommend Deepwater for anybody?
No. Unless you're going to do a bad movie night for Chinese New Year, I would not recommend this to my friend's wife if it was available.
I'm sorry. I would totally recommend only for bad movie nights. If you need something just entertaining, or if you're under the influence of something, alcohol, something herbal, I think this is the movie you should watch, because I think you will be very entertained with the expressionless acting of Ben Affleck.
And drop some acid while you're at it.
Well, the thing I wanted, my favorite Ben Affleck scene of all time, I don't know if you ever saw Changing Lanes.
Yes, I did.
Remember when he had Samuel L. Jackson's character arrested? He's like, yeah, that's right, motherfucker. And he's doing all that. That is the type of energy this movie needed from Ben Affleck.
But that Ben Affleck no longer exists. It's just him thinking he's Batman every time.
Well, I need something more energetic. I even at times I kept thinking maybe Matt Damon would have been a better choice, because at least it would be something he's never played before. And here I just feel like we're watching Ben Affleck repeat himself. But I still would recommend for bad movie night. So
yeah, that
is our review of Deepwater by Adrian Lin, which is still available on Hulu as we speak. And that ends our business for this episode. But as you know, we always have unfinished business that needs to be taken care of. And I ask you folks at home this: have you seen Moonstruck? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome. Andre, what movie would you recommend for the folks?
I'm going to go with the Nicolas Cage movie instead of one we talked about. Have you seen The Rock? If not, why not? Because it's fucking awesome.
And that is how we're going to end this episode. See you next time, folks.